This might be a video of me watching paint dry, or rather shellac, but stick around, we might learn something about the shockingly short shelf life of shellac. As you can see, I've got 5 batches of shellac here, ranging from a fresh batch which was made yesterday down to a batch 5 weeks old. And I'm going to see whether there's any discernible difference in the drying time between the fresh batch and the old stuff. And I have to say, I suspect there will be. Let me give you some background to this. I went to Crimson Guitars a month ago where Christopher showed me how to French polish, and I've got some videos, you can go and watch them. And this was the batch I used, and I'd made this fresh on Christopher's advice, because I'd made this batch over a week earlier, about 9 days before my visit, because I was going on holiday and I didn't think I'd have time to make another batch. And on Christopher's advice, on coming back off holiday, I tested this batch to see if it was still fresh. I put a drop of shellac, or in fact on the top of this lid, and left it overnight to see if it dried or how hard it dried. And it was still a sticky mess the following morning, which shocked me somewhat, given that the shellac seems to dry very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few drops of each of these batches on this glass plate, and I'm going to leave them an hour, maybe 3 hours, and then overnight, and we'll see whether we can see any difference between the drying times of a fresh batch and an old batch. Because frankly, I don't really want to throw away all my old shellac, because I'm running out of this expensive rectified spirit. Incidentally, this batch here is made with denatured alcohol, and I'm wondering whether this batch stays fresher longer. However, I thought that denatured alcohol did not contain water, and I think I'm wrong, particularly on this batch anyway. This is, it's in Portuguese, álcool etílico sanitário. It is medical alcohol, and it's the denaturant in this appears to be some sort of antiseptic. It's called in Portuguese, it's called cetrimida, which I think is cetrimide. I think it's an antiseptic. So there may actually still be water in this. It's not been sort of chemically purified. Lab alcohol contains various nasties like benzene, and is called denatured alcohol, but it contains no water. All the water's been removed and replaced with things that are considered to be denaturants, and in other words, you can't drink it. You can't drink this, but I think it doesn't say on the label. It says it's 96% alcohol, and then it says it's got 0.25 at 0.30% per volume cetrimide, which to me sounds like a tiny amount, and it sounds like there's probably still water in this. The reason I'm so keen on there being no water is if there is a difference in the shelf life of these, and if by some process the shellac is going off, with it being an organic compound, I suspect that the water in the alcohol may be a factor in that. So it would have been nice to do an experiment with no water. I may have to buy some meths and do the experiment again, but I don't like using meths because in Britain it's purple coloured. Maybe I can get some industrial meths that doesn't have the dye in it, but I believe meths doesn't contain water. I think it contains benzene and methanol. So a very simple method. I'm just going to put a series, that's 4 drops, 1, 2, 3, 4, and those two are running into each other. I'm putting a number of patches on here. In fact, oh well, we'll see. Let's make it 3 drops. Keep them separate. It's just so I can do this test multiple times. I might have to redo these. And that's running as well. Right, let's try this a bit different. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then the really old batch. I have to remember that this is the fresh batch and this is the batch 2 weeks old. Let's put another bit just here. Keep them separate. And we'll come back in an hour's time and see if we can discern any difference between these batches. There's a physical difference. This looks a lot darker than the other batches, which is interesting. This is the batch I used, and I'm wondering whether some of the alcohol evaporated during the day and has made this stronger. So that's something to bear in mind. This may actually be a stronger mixture with some of the alcohol having evaporated, because we left this jar open a lot of the time because we were using the top as a little vessel to soak the rubber in. This is the situation after 15 minutes, and they look like they're drying quite well. So let's see if we can see if there's any difference if we hit them with a pointy stick. That's still quite gloopy. So I'm assuming the others are, yeah. Oh, that's very thin. That's doing all right, I think. And that's very sticky. So not really much discernible difference at the moment. Let's leave them. I need to mention that I'm using de-waxed shellac flakes. The reason this might be relevant is that I understand that waxed shellac may last longer, if indeed there is a problem with shelf life. It's now been an hour, so let's see if we can tell any difference between the different batches. Fresh, still sticky. Well, if the fresh is sticky, the rest of it's going to be sticky as well. That doesn't appear to be. Those do appear to be drying quicker. That's not so bad. The denatured, that's almost dry. And that one's really quite soft. Oh, not so bad there. Is there a difference? 3 hours have elapsed. Can we tell any difference between these? The fresh, that's doing quite well. That's still a little bit tacky, but that is almost dry. You can dent it a little bit. 2 weeks old, still a gel. 1 month old, although that is thicker than that there, for instance. Gel-like. And this one, gel-like. And the 5 weeks old, gel-like. So none of these is truly dry, but it does look like the fresh might be drying a little bit better. Well, maybe not. It's still a bit gel-like. So we'll leave this overnight and we'll see what happens. So the moment of truth. This has been drying for 20 hours. Let's see what we've got. First of all, the fresh. Yeah, now that's interesting. That still is a little bit gel-like. It's fairly hard. Let me get something a little bit harder and pointier. It's not breaking. Well, maybe it is breaking. So that's the fresh. Let's try the 2 weeks old. Yeah, I'd say that's about the same. Let's try the thick 1 month old used stuff. Oh, very gel-like. But then that's quite thick. But yeah, it's still quite gel-like. There's a definite difference between those two batches. So now the 1 month old denatured. Yeah, quite gel. And there doesn't really feel to be much of a difference between these two, to be honest. Although this one is a little drier, but then I'd already been poking at this. It is fairly gel-like. And the 5 week old. Yeah, quite. It's a little bit jelly there. Not a hard fracturing consistency that I might have expected. Let's just go back to this one. Well, is there really that much of a difference? You see, this one is quite hard. Obviously the thin stuff inside is completely dry. Even on that one. And that one is very dry. And this one, yeah. It's just the thick stuff around the edges doesn't seem to dry very well in 24-hour or 20-hour period. You know what? I don't think I can tell much of a difference between any of these batches. I think the reason that I originally thought that this batch had gone off overnight. The reason I thought this had gone off by leaving it overnight was it was quite a thick puddle on top of the jam jar, and it just didn't set overnight. And to be honest, I don't think the fresh batch would either. This is still a little bit gel-like here, even though in the middle it seems to be perfectly adequately hardened. The reason I made this video was because I've been told that shellac can go off really quickly in as little as a week. Now I've kept these in fairly good conditions, some at room temperature, but mostly fairly cool environments, out of sunlight, so maybe I've treated them carefully and they've survived well. Maybe in hot climes shellac may go off quicker, but I can't tell the difference between the fresh batch and the 5 week old batch. The most interesting thing I've discovered is that this used batch here is much thicker than the others, and I think that shows what can happen if you leave a jar open in a workshop all day with the alcohol evaporating and it concentrating down. It's really quite noticeable. So have I added to the community knowledge on shellac? Maybe. At least it's given me the confidence to use shellac that's a few weeks old. I don't think it goes off that quickly. This batch I never even used, simply because it was a fortnight old and I was worried that it might have gone off. But I knew I was going to be doing this experiment. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more.